Good morning, everybody, and good morning to those who are all online. So, I just want to touch some of the big strategic reasons why we're here, and I'm going to run through very quickly the reason why the changes that have happened in the last year are important for local systems, as well as the way that the government and the system is expecting us to deliver this. So healthcare responsibilities for the armed forces are written down there. And the key element here is that for most of the issues for healthcare delivery for the armed forces are going to be done through integrated care boards, through the systems and the partnerships. And the delivery piece in the partnerships with the local authorities, as well as the charities, is absolutely fundamental to this. NHS England centrally has significant funding to deliver some key services, which I'll touch on in a minute. The NHS long-term plan, this is the really boring stuff, but it's actually quite important, allows us to underpin and draw down funding to make sure that the commitments for the armed forces community are reflected in the long-term plan. And so what we end up with is a forward view. And this is signed up to by the NHS England board, and there are 9 commitments, and they're very clearly laid down, out of which can flow a significant amount of activity, work, and delivery. And you can see them all down there. This is all available online to read. And they create a framework for integrated care boards and the NHS working together to deliver for the armed forces community. The 9 commitments, and they set out how we're going to work. Now, one of the things that NHS England does at the same time is it has a statutory responsibility for the commissioning of healthcare for all those who are serving and family members and that's anybody registered on the Defence Medical Information System. Now, that means that those people who are serving have their care commissioned from the NHS, as well as in transition, and then when they come and they leave the services. Now, for families, quite often, that's all of the time. And for reservists, they bounce backwards and forwards. And for serving people, they spend the first 18 years of their life, say, in the NHS system, in the public system, then they join the military. Some of them may do a short time, some of them may do 35 years, and then they come back into being civilians. So you can see this flow of activity, and some people will need different levels of care depending on the issues that they have come across in their time of service. So the key element here is about improving the health and well-being outcomes. Now, a lot of this is informed by patients telling us what's required, by people like Matt and his team and the researchers being able to go out and do more detailed research. And it's also informed by the practice of clinicians and at the same time. So this isn't a single person owning the reins all the time. This is about us all working together. And in many ways, this becomes apolitical, because the right thing to do for individuals with certain injuries is to look after them in a particular way. And that's why we're all here. We need to make it as apolitical as possible. So how are we already doing this across the NHS as far as that's concerned? So OpCourage is our nationally commissioned service for mental health. The VTN in there is the physical health, and the 2 cross-refer. And while that says, for example, in the VTN, it says 450 plus referrals, some of those are individuals who come through the system 50 plus times because of the nature of the injuries that they had. So this is why we can wrap social prescribing, we can wrap military charities, we can wrap a whole lot of activity around those individuals. OpNova. Now, this is veterans and ex-serving people, because some of them leave via the justice system. And again, we know that some of these individuals have quite complex needs on entering the justice system, and it's great to see colleagues from the constabularies here. Thank you very much for coming along today, and you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And we know that some of them are at the top end of levels of activity, and then it strays into areas complex, particularly around domestic abuse and domestic violence. So where these people need a health line while the time they're actually, say, serving time, and then they need help getting into employment, and then into education, and then into jobs, and into housing, is the key bit that makes them not come back in at the other end and looking after them and their families. The accreditations are also extremely important in this, and it's good to see some of the people in the room today, and thanks to people like David and Andy who are part of this. So the idea is to have every primary care network with an accredited practice by 2025. We're already at well over 80% now, even as we speak. That number's gone up since we did the slideshow a couple of weeks ago. We're also working on the number of practices that are out there that are actually individually delivering, and that allows practices to go, and GP staff, primary care staff, to go to a cupboard in the corner, open it and go, this is available for the Armed Forces community, as well as all the other Armed Forces services at the same time. The work that David's doing on the Veteran Covenant Healthcare Alliance is working with the trusts. And we know that the trusts want to, right from the top all the way down to the delivery at the same time. That's acute trusts, that's mental health trusts, and a number of other areas. They're leading now into care homes and hospices, and hopefully we'll be looking into other areas fairly soon. And that's to give trusts an understanding of what's required. The key thing we already know through integrated care boards is that trusts and primary care are already starting to work together with the community care and with the local authorities. So you can see how this is all starting to work at the right level, and which is why, say, this regional representation and the more local you get becomes more and more important. And then we've got Voiri here with a Step Into Health, which is an absolute key determinant of, say, taking very capable people from the armed forces and asking them to come and join the NHS. It's not all doctors and nurses, it's program managers, it's all sorts of IT specialists, it's people working in estates. Then it goes on and on and on. We've got a brigadier down in the southwest, down in Cornwall, who's a porter. In the last couple of weeks or so, he's gone in. Why is he a porter? He works 3 days a week, and he absolutely loves pushing people around and engaging with them. Why not? He's got a great set of skills, and that's a fantastic thing. So what are the forthcoming developments? So the Op Courage, which we relaunched fairly recently, which is the integration of all the 3 levels of mental health services that we're delivering, coming together now, and we're going to be campaigning for that through, as we would talk it through the comms and media. The work that we're doing, that Harper's also leading on in this part of the world, around families, single point of contact. And we know that a lot of families, in moving around the system, quite often land in a new system, and then it's quite difficult for them to re-navigate into the system where they've come from. Some of them are already on care. Some of them are already about to go into care. Some of them have health and education care planning that they want to get back into. And it might be as simple as continuity of drugs, but it might also be understanding transitioning families who are leaving the military, get themselves into the system. You can see there's a whole range of issues that can be supported for those families, and the pilots that we've got in all regions now around the country are working together to support integrated care systems in the future to help deliver for those people. We're supporting victims and survivors of sexual assault and abuse, and we know that the military are not immune to this, and this is a really key area to support the individuals going through that. Further work with the VCHA, as you see down there, and then we're going to be supporting Op Fortitude, which is the housing initiative from the OVA, hello Tom, to make sure that we can work with that housing for looking after veterans, to make sure that they've got somewhere to live, which is then integrated into the health systems at the same time. So you can see this is an extremely busy space where we want to be working with you, and you can see the strategic drivers of why we're doing what we can do, but we're also requiring the integrated care boards working together and individually to deliver on that. So thank you very much. I think we're going to hand over now, and then we'll do questions in a minute.
Thank you very much, Richard. We're going to hear from Professor Matt Fossey now about the research that's going on. And one of the reasons for putting this on the agenda is that the crucial importance is that there are a number of research hubs in our universities that are doing fantastic research work around veterans and the military, not just veterans, serving as well. The NHS is particularly poor at putting the best practice into the front line quickly. It often takes up to 6 or 7 years from recommendations from NICE to end up in frontline practice. And one of the crucial things we'd like to do using the network that we've got here is to pick up some of this fantastic work that's being done in the research space and bring it into the front line much more quickly than we are doing at the moment. So, Professor Fossey.
Thank you, Harper. Hi, good morning, everybody, and good morning, everybody online as well. Assuming my thing works. Yeah, here we go. Right, so I'm Matt Fossey. I'm a professor of public services research, and I'm based at Anglia Ruskin University in Chelmsford, not the one in Cambridge. So just to give you a very, very quick potted background, I spent nearly 20 odd years working in the NHS and then latterly went into academia. I'm really, really interested in actually how we work with patients, we work with carers, and we work with services to make sure that the research is meaningful, so that it actually has an impact at the end. And we, as academics, have a responsibility for doing that, because often, we're accused of writing in esoteric language and writing stuff that people don't understand. And so how on earth can you put it into practice? So my job, in a way, as the boss of quite a big and active research team, is to make sure that you guys are able to understand what we're doing, and to make sure that actually you make people's lives better by looking at the research outcomes and saying, how can we apply this in the practice sense? Clearly, we're not the only group at ARU, bottom right, who are doing work in the UK. There are research hubs across the country, as Harper said. I think you're getting copies of these slides anyway, so you don't need to take extensive notes. But I'm just going to focus, obviously, on the work that we're doing in East Anglia. It's really important as well to say that we have to think about this in the context of the policy background as well. And colleagues in the Office of Veteran Affairs have been for a year or so now developing their data and research strategy. So this is sort of lifted directly from that. And I think it's important to say that a lot of effort, a lot of work has gone on to really engage with the academic community, so that we are talking to policymakers, we are talking to people at a high level in the NHS, so that they can actually see where the work's developing. And likewise, we can then say, do you know what, here's an area we need to be focusing in on and looking at, because there's pointless us counting angels on pinheads, or whatever some academics do, because there's no point in my opinion, looking at stuff that we don't need to look at. It's really, really important, particularly when we're looking at health and we're looking at social care, that we're actually applying our research effectively, not just philosophizing about stuff. This is a very busy slide, but it's a bit of an overview of my institute. So we're very busy. We've been going now for nearly 10 years. This is a little bit out of date in terms of funding. In fact, we found out yesterday there's another £500,000 coming in to do some more interesting research around gambling between ourselves and colleagues in Swansea. But we have, I've got around about 20 research staff that work for me. I'm the conductor of an orchestra. They all do the heavy lifting, and I sort of, help them oversee what they're doing and supervise the research work that goes on. We're very successful at actually bringing in funding. I know funding's next on the agenda, but funding is very, very important. Research isn't free. Universities, we don't, survive on thin air. Somebody has to pay for the research that goes on, and research is very expensive. If you want to, if you want cheap research, there are plenty of people out there that will tell you what you want to hear, and just hire them to do a bit of work for you. If you really want to understand what's going on, you want to get under the surface and spend some time really, really, really understanding it, it's going to cost money, and actually the answers may not be necessarily what you want to hear, but it will certainly help you to change and improve your organisations and the work that you do. Just in terms of this as well, I mean, another thing that we're very, very heavily involved in is working with interns as well. We have a lot of interns coming to us from both the UK and internationally to work with our team. We are one of the world leading teams in terms of social research and the military and veterans. And we have interns from New York, Boston, San Francisco, from Canada as well. We've got one from Johns Hopkins University coming to us next week, I think, as well as working very closely with our own local medical schools as well, in terms of understanding some of the challenges. And we have lots of doctoral students that we supervise as well, including work, you'll be pleased to know, on military children. So we're just about to start a doctorate on looking at the transition experiences of kids moving from Cyprus back to the UK and how they're reintegrating with friends and into schools and things like that. So just in terms of the structure of my team, we've got 5 sort of areas, big areas of research that we focus in on. So mainly looking at families, equalities and diversity and inclusion, knowledge exchange, which is the area that I lead on, so how we communicate the research. An area around looking at narratives, so looking at how we use people's stories to stimulate research. And one of our most recent things that we've done is to develop a Centre for Military Women's Research, because women have been serving in the military now for over 100 years, but to date nobody's actually pulled together what we know about from a research perspective about women in the military, some of the challenges that they face, both in service and as veterans as well. And it's some really, really fascinating stuff that's starting to emerge from the research here. And so thank you to a lot of colleagues from NHS England, from OVA, and others who have funded some of that really important research. Also, my colleague, Mike Almond, who's, I believe, watching this from afar at the moment, is also running an initiative across the university where we're looking to make our university more armed forces friendly. So what are we doing in terms of staff that work at the university who are reservists? How are we helping them to make sure they're getting the right sorts of support? Ditto for students. Also students from military families. How are we looking at widening participation to get young people into universities? Because we know they're underrepresented in the university sector. And how are we making sure across the university as well that we know what research is going on? I know it sounds like a sort of a simple thing to solve, but we've got hundreds and hundreds of researchers. Some of them are doing stuff with the military that may not be sort of centrally known about. So we're trying to sort of understand what's going on across the university. So I just wanted us to run through a couple of projects, and I've got a couple of minutes apparently, so I'm doing all right. So these are just a few of our current projects. We've got 25 projects on the go at the moment. So these are the partners we're working with in brackets at the end. So we're doing some really, really interesting work on the loss of limbs and loss of limb function that we're doing with Blesma. And the purpose behind this work is to look at the impact on families. Because whilst we're very, very good in the NHS at providing people with Gucci prosthetics, one of the things that we haven't necessarily done historically is to actually say, well, what's the broader impact, the societal impact, when somebody is severely injured or severely wounded? So we're doing a lot of work in that area. And you'll see the last bullet point, or the penultimate bullet point, talks about intimacy after injury as well. So interesting, we're doing some work with colleagues in the Ukraine, which is looking at, well, what happens after young people have become quite severely wounded, in their early 20s or late teens, and they want to go on to have fulfilled lives thereafter. How do they get over the intimacy barriers? How do you make love? How do you fall in love if you've got life-changing injuries? So we're pulling together an international team at the moment, including colleagues from the Netherlands and the States, to try to look at challenging some of these sorts of presumptions and around intimacy and sex after serious injury. Some of the other interesting bits of work that we're doing, I talked about the Centre for Military Women's Research. We're doing quite a lot of work at the moment looking at the challenges that women face in accessing services. And this is particularly important for the OVA and for the NHS England and local authorities. How do we make sure actually that we're providing the right sorts of services that are appropriate for everybody that wants to access them? And we know from our research that, for instance, Op Courage services, women are underrepresented in Op Courage. Why is that? You know, what are the barriers to people accessing these types of services, and how can we improve them? I've only got a minute. I'm going to zip through this stuff. This is, please have a look at this. This is the centre. You will get the slide, so you can just click on the link at the bottom. And I just thought I'd end with a few sort of hot topics for research. These are areas that we really need to look at. We're starting to look at, but there's not enough work that's being done here yet to really help us to understand what the challenges are. I think that's my time up. I apologise. Harper's only given me 10 minutes. I can only talk all day on this sort of stuff. But anyway, you can catch me after the panel.
Thank you very much, Matt. And he's quite right. There will be at least an hour at lunchtime for networking, and there's at least an hour and a half at the end of the day for networking. And that's one of the intentions today, is to encourage people. You can also book in through Elle if you want a one-to-one with some of the exhibitors, if you need some dedicated time to talk through how you can work together. Just on the research side, I'd like to give out a big shout out to a guy called Hari Bodamaga, who is a double amputee and has just summited Everest. It's an incredible feat. He did it 3 days ago, but what an amazing feat. And you can see where research is applied. And one of the things I'd like to encourage going forward from today is that every time you have local meetings around the Armed Forces agenda, you talk about what research is going on and how you can link to it. Because one of the things that's certainly happening in Essex, linked to the university, is some research into PTSD. And one of the things we have been talking about is that PTSD is not just a military issue. It affects lots of uniformed services, including the police, prison service, and the health service. So nurses, doctors, paramedics all have PTSD. So that's one of the reasons why this research is crucial. It doesn't just apply to the military side. I'd like to introduce Rachel Smith, who's going to talk about the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust, which is a crucial bit of funding. And you'll hear where some of it's being applied locally. And we've also got a couple of people in the audience who are funded by the Armed Forces Covenant Trust Fund at the moment. So it's a really important source of funding, and I think it's crucial that you understand how you can access this and what they're requiring for the future, particularly working together in partnership, which is what they're after.
Thank you very much, Harper. Good morning, everyone. My name's Rachel Smith. I'm from the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust. Let me just get the slide up. So just to give you a brief introduction as to who we actually are. We are a charity, and we're also a non-departmental public body, and we look after the Armed Forces Covenant Fund, and that's worth £10 million every year. We have 4 broad funding themes, which you can read for yourself. These will be for now and for future years. The Covenant Fund itself is worth £10 million, but we also work with HM Government, and we run other funding programmes for armed forces communities. An example of this is we ran the COVID Impact Fund in 2020, where we delivered emergency funding to armed forces community as a direct response to the pandemic, and that was delivered out to the communities that needed it within 6 weeks. And we also have funding programmes from the Veterans Mental Health and Welfare Fund, the Office of Veterans Affairs, and current funds. We operate the AF3 Families Fund on behalf of the Ministry of Defence, and also the Homelessness Fund on behalf of the OVA. So this shows our funding that's taken place in 2022-23. So while each fund has its own programme, they all interconnect and they deliver real change for armed forces communities. So we have continual learning, evaluation and impact, which all informs our future programme development. So we award grants throughout the UK, but we can also fund projects overseas on UK Armed Forces bases, and these support serving personnel and their families whilst on operations. So I'm now going to talk about the funding that we've currently got supporting armed forces in acute hospital settings. So this was jointly funded by the Covenant Fund through us, the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust, and NHS England, and it supports a small number of 2-year pilot projects, and they're trying to find better ways to support veterans and their families in an acute hospital setting. So applications were open to hospitals that could show they'd already worked with others to improve veterans who access their services. And we ordered over £2 million awarded to 17 projects across the UK. So there's 12 NHS trusts in England, 2 in Wales, 2 in Scotland, and we have an organisation in Northern Ireland. So hospitals created a role of armed forces advocate, and they provided additional support to coordinate services and organisational involvement. So most of these projects are now advancing towards their second year of their funding. So from the pilot programme, it's emerged that the different projects around the UK, they focus on the needs specific to their regional areas, and this results in several different models being delivered. But one thing that's very common to all the programmes is the dedication that all our funded advocates put into their project work, and they've embodied the delivery of the Covenant in everything they do. I'm delighted to see some of our advocates in the local area here today. If you could make yourselves known, that would be absolutely great. So we have Chris, Tracy and JJ. So please, during the networking times, very much encourage you to speak to them today so they can tell you more about the work that they're doing. So last year we held a very well received webinar, and that focused on the key progress made by the Acute Hospitals Programme, and it provided an update on some of the latest emerging data and trends from the programmes, as well as an opportunity to hear directly from some of our projects. So as this is very much a pilot programme, we are very keen to support them in the what next, and recently we held a roadshow in Chester with key NHS stakeholders to support our advocates in exploring sustainability. So we'll be running another series of roadshows, one in early 2024 in Scotland, and we'll be culminating the programme with a webinar for all stakeholders to support on the what next for these projects. We're conducting an evaluation of the programme in real time with our research partners at university. So the Chester Evaluation Team holds regular and national regional webinars for the advocates, and this provides a learning platform for them. And it also gives the opportunity for them to update the AFAs with the data that they've collected, which really helps the project understand in real time what this means moving forward. I'm now going to talk very briefly about impact. So as you can see, last financial year, we funded 342 projects to support the armed forces communities, and this was a total of 14.7 million. So this year, we're keen to understand our grant assessment and management processes a bit more, and to develop them externally to increase engagement with the military charity sector in order to more thoroughly understand our landscape of need and the direction of travel. So as you can see, these are the 4 priorities that we're keen to understand this year. So looking at projects that address specific need, how we can support our projects, how we can encourage people to share more their ideas, experience, and I'm going to be talking about VPPP, or the Veterans Places, Pathways and People Programme, in just a second, and keep sharing the learning from our projects. So I'm now going to talk about funding opportunities that we have at the moment. So Force for Change is now open, and the next round closes on the 17th of July. It's a grant of up to £15,000 for 1 year. And you can see the eligibility there. So charities, CICs, local authorities, health bodies and schools can apply. And your project will need to address a specific need for armed forces communities in your local area. We really, really want to hear about what's most needed this year, and that's why we're running such a broad funding programme. So if you applied for a grant, you'd need to show how this would help specifically address these compelling or specific needs in a meaningful way, and tell us about the current gap that exists in your provision and why this project might help. One current theme that we're keen to address at the moment is the continuing cost of living crisis. So some of our latest projects have helped address some of the challenges that the current economic climate has presented for our armed forces communities. So we have 2 rounds of this programme available for application this year. As I said before, the next round closes on the 17th of July. And if you apply, you will receive a decision before the end of October 2023. The second round ends on the 13th of December, and that will receive a decision by March 2024. The next programme I want to talk about is our bigger programme, which is reaching and supporting armed forces communities. Again, this is a two-round programme, and it's grants of up to £100,000 for a 3-year period, again for projects that address hidden, compelling or complex needs. The eligibility for this particular programme is charities and KICs. And again, if you were to apply, you would need to show how your grant would help address these compelling and complex needs for specific and identified beneficiaries, and show where evidence has highlighted gaps to support and provision. So we use the words hidden and compelling, and that's to describe complex needs that some people in the armed forces communities experience. A hidden need would be a well less understood or emerging need within the armed forces communities, where a grant such as this would make a significant difference. So this could include projects for specific groups within communities who've not previously been able to access any help or funding. So a compelling need would be a challenging and pressing need within armed forces communities, which has a limiting impact on someone's life. So someone looking at compelling needs might be looking at issues that are well known within the armed forces communities, but where a specific or targeted project would make a real significant and lasting difference. We will consider projects that support serving personnel, their families, veterans and their families. Grants that we have previously awarded which support serving personnel, for example, have had only a limited reach to reservists. So, we are really looking at what the reach of these programs would be. So last financial year, we made 38 awards over the UK, and the programme so far, it's awarded 6 million over 65 projects. So if you were to apply by July, you would receive a decision before the end of September this year. And if you apply before November, the end date is 13th of November, you'd receive a decision before the end of March 2024. Now I want to briefly talk about sustainability, because obviously we provide funding, but how does a project actually sustain itself beyond the life of the grant? And we always at the Trust have a very focus on sustainability, and we really want people to tell us what ways their project will have a sustainable outcome that will go beyond the life of the project, and we like to support our grant holders in doing that. We recognise people might require to access finance for ongoing delivery. However, they might also leave a legacy of ongoing partnership and collaboration. So if you do apply, you'll need to tell us about the long-term changes that you expect your project to have. Very quickly going to talk about VPPP, or Veterans, Places, People and Pathways. You'll be hearing from Darren later, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. We have 10 country and regional portfolios, and these convene and curate 170 plus projects across the UK within these portfolios, and these are to develop stronger partnerships to give veterans better access to support and address mental well-being needs. We also have 4 strategic grants, a cross-sector oversight group, which will develop a lasting legacy of understanding veterans' mental health and well needs, and enable easier access to NHS services, for example, and the safe delivery of support service. So veterans will benefit in a number of longer lasting ways. Up on the screen, you'll see the details of East of England, the Bridge for Heroes. Darren will be talking to you later, but I would very much advise you to get in contact with him, with your organisation, if you're not already involved in VPPP. So what next for our funding? We're moving to 3-year funding rounds in 2024. So essentially we will have 30 million over 3 years. So we'll be looking at the priorities. I'd like to make you all aware that we are holding a public consultation this summer. So there are a number of different ways you can get involved. Sign up to our newsletter on our website, and we'll also be holding regular updates through our social channels on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter, which you can see on the screen in front of you. But we really want to hear from everybody who's involved in the armed forces community as to what our funding should actually involve and how you can get involved. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. As you can see, that there's some fantastic work going on there, which is really enabling. And I'm hoping what we'll do today is try and look at sustainability and what structures we can rely on for the future.